In this video, I'm going to show you how to go from this to this. There's a lot of different ways to do the KAC vertical grip chop modification. So I'm just going to be showing you the way that I found works best for me. If there's a way that you like better, you're welcome to go ahead and go that route. But this particular setup works really good. So I chop it in a way that does not use a cross bolt. I'm still using that factory bottom piece there to attach it to the 1913 rail. All you're going to need to perform this modification is, of course, a Knight's Armament vertical grip, aka the broom handle grip, which for most applications, this is a little bit too long. And it lacks some of the aesthetics that that shorter stubby grip gives you. You're also going to need something to cut this. It could be a hacksaw, scroll saw, bandsaw, anything like that. I'm going to be using a scroll saw to cut the main piece of the polymer from this grip, and then I'll just be cleaning it up with some sandpaper. The other thing I'd highly recommend using is a tap. This is a 7/8 to 9 tap, just an inexpensive tap off. Pick this up from Amazon, and we're just tapping into polymer here, so it doesn't have to be a very expensive, high quality tap, and you're going to understand why we need this in just a second. Let's head on over and start by chopping this factory grip down to size. All right, so you can go ahead and start by removing this portion from the KAC grip and set that aside. We're going to be chopping this down. Now, you're going to chop it down to your desired length, but for me, I'm going to cut it down all the way to this first little line here. So let's chop all of this piece off. You can see here's one that I've previously done. That's what we're going to go ahead and remove using this scroll saw here. All right, there we go. And it doesn't have to be pretty. We can clean that up later. There's the piece that's been removed. You can see I kind of cut it right at that line. I could take just a little bit off that. All right, and I'm going to be cleaning this up on my belt sander here. Of course, you could just use normal sandpaper and a flat surface. I have this available, so I'm going to use this just to save a little bit of time. And I want to get this just as flat and flush as possible. All right, and that's looking pretty good there. It's about as far as I want to go with a power tool. If anything, I can do the rest just on a flat surface, but that looks really good, and we can clean it up just a little bit later if needed. Now, if you look down in the body of this grip, hopefully you're able to pick it up with the lighting. There's about 4 or so rows of thread available in order to put the core and the end cap back into place. This is not going to be sufficient enough. You can see if I go ahead and try to screw this in, it's going to stop right about there. Now, what some have done is they just ground down the threads in the core, which allows it to go in further, which is not a bad option, but you're going to see later on that we're going to have to make room for this base section here. And after you do that, it'll only leave you with about 1 or 2 threads, and that I'm not super comfortable with that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I want to utilize all these threads, and I'm going to use the tap that I was talking about earlier, the 7/8 inch by 9 tap, and I'm going to run some additional threads through here, and that's going to allow this to go all the way in, about 2/3 of the way into the actual body of the vertical grip. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and chase these threads that are already here, And then we're going to go ahead and go on past that. Now, this is going to be a little tricky. It's going to be tight. All right, so I have this little piece here. You can use anything. And I'm just going to kind of run this thread through. And take your time with this if you're running the thread. Once you start feeling some resistance, back off a little bit. Go a little bit further. And this is very simple. Just take your time. And we're going to add those additional threads to the grip. So we can go ahead and pull our tap out, and you can see that it has made quite the mess. So just go ahead and take that, clean her up a little bit. And you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but it's threaded most of the way through, about 2/3 of the way through the body. So now we're not going to have to worry about those threads bottoming out at all. So now it's going to go all the way up until right there. So that takes us to the next step, which is going to be to remove about 1/4 inch or so of material, basically from here to there, from this inside ledge of the KAC grip. So that's going to sit flush in there with the O-ring in place. Like a lot of this project, there's a lot of ways that this material can be removed. What I do is I'm just going to use a Dremel with this attachment here, and that's going to help remove a lot of that material. And then I'm going to go in with a sanding wheel and just clean it up a bit there on the inside. So take your time with this. We just need it big enough to fit this portion with the O-ring. And we want there to be some tension when it goes in there. So we don't want to make it so big that it just easily goes in. We want it to feel snug as we're tightening that O-ring into place. So go a little bit at a time until you get to that sweet spot. And just as a bit of reference, you can take a look at the end of the factory grip there just to see how large that opening is, to get an idea. Now it is beveled on the end, so at first it looks like it's just that thin, but it's actually a little bit thicker. But that'll give you a pretty good idea of what you're going for. All right, so here we are currently. It's not pretty, but that's all right. Like I said, we'll clean it up once we get a little bit closer. And you can see I'm still not able to get it past. So I'm going to just keep on going there just a little bit more. And then as soon as it's close, I'm going to switch to that sanding wheel. All right, so here's where we're at. It's to the point where I'm able to start getting it past. It's not going to be quite wide enough for the O-ring, but that's where the sanding wheel is going to come in. So I'm just going to kind of fine tune it with that. It's going to remove a little bit less material as we go, and we'll get her cleaned up. And you can kind of see in there, we're kind of creating our own little ledge there, about maybe a little over a quarter of an inch in there. All right, that's about a pass or two with the sanding drum. And I'd say one more complete circle, and that's about all the material that we will need to remove. All right, it's looking good. It's looking rough, but it's also looking good. Let's see if you can see in there with the lighting. So when I came in there with that first tool, I kind of built myself a ledge, and then the sanding disc kind of just rides right off that ledge and just smooths up the inside there. So get it into place, O-ring passes, and yeah, that's looking good. It's snug. Now, obviously you can see here that we got a lot, too much sticking out of the top there. So we're going to be removing a significant amount of material from there. Before we do that, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit with a razor. Just get some of these, just kind of clean this edge up a bit. Get some of that, those shavings out of there. All right. And then what I want to do, and this is just for aesthetics, is I want to put just a slight round that off just a little bit. and that's not going to take a whole lot. So I'm going to start off by using just this flat piece of the belt sander without actual electricity. All right, so that's how it's looking there. And you can play around with that as much as you want. I just wanted to kind of take that hard edge off. And I'm going to finish that up with a some lighter grit sandpaper. Same thing with this inside here. I'm going to hit that with some 400 grit ultimately. All right, so there it is, just cleaned up with some little bit of sandpaper, and it's a little bit dusty, but it's looking pretty good. All right, so next up, we need to cut down our core here. And what I'm going to start off by doing is cutting it just in front of the threads. Again, there's a few ways of going about this. This is hollow, so you can't just chop it down and make a new nipple up top. So I'm going to cut it just in front of these threads, again, over on the hole saw, and then I'm going to cut this portion down to length so that it just protrudes as much as we need it to. And if you took a look at your factory one before chopping it, you'll see that without it installed on a rail, it sticks up about that much. So you don't want it perfectly even. If you want it to be the same as a factory, you want it to just be slightly protruding. All right, so I'm going to go down to the scroll saw and give that a chop. All right, so we are chopped. You can see there it is hollow inside. And I left just enough material to make sure I get it cleaned up nice and flat on the belt sander here. Again, if you don't have a belt sander, you can just use some sandpaper on a flat surface. It'll do the same thing. And then we're going to go ahead and figure out just how long we need this piece to be. All right, so that piece is looking really nice. And then I'm just going to go ahead and install that. And I'm going to use this to measure how much we need to remove. So I'm going to go ahead and just shove that down into the grip and mark it with a pencil. Get a nice clear mark there. And now we know that this is the amount of material we have to remove from that end. And we just want to add about 2 millimeters to account for that nipple protruding from the actual grip itself. All right, so I have it marked. So I'm going to cut this on the bandsaw, and I'm going to leave a little bit of extra material. So it's going to give me something more to work with on the belt sander so I can really get it dialed in. All right, so I got that chopped. And let's see where we're sitting. It should be on the long side, and it is perfect. So now I'm just going to use the belt sander to kind of take it down to exactly where I want it. All right, and that's right where I want it to be. So just slightly protruding from the grip. And you'll notice with the factory KAC grip, this is typically, there's usually a little bit of a gap here in between the two. That O-ring seals the space on the inside, but there's usually a little bit of a gap. So when this presses down from the rail, that should be right where we want it to be. And you want to be really careful when you are taking material off of this core piece, because this is a piece we can't replace. And at this point, we are pretty much done. So what you can do is just make sure you clean up any residual material from these inside corners. And if you want, there's a lot of dust and debris inside of these. So if you want to go ahead and wash those out, you can do that. Not 100% necessary, just up to you if you don't want it kind of making a mess down the road. So in a lot of cases, some guys have went and kind of super glued these together. I don't personally, but if you want to, you certainly can. Just make sure it dries before putting it back in here. Otherwise, you could potentially super glue it into place. So let me go ahead, throw this on the rifle on the 1913 rail and see how it looks. So there's the new chopped grip on there next to the old one I have. Looks pretty good. Now, one thing I notice is that this KAC grip is slightly newer than this one, and you can kind of tell from the wear. And the length is like a millimeter different, so there is like a little bit more of a gap on that one. So if I just want to trim that core up just a smidge, I can close that gap, but that's just aesthetics. As it sits right now, it's perfectly functional, locked up tight, and good to go. So there it is. That's how I do the KAC grip chop. I am not any type of machinist, as you can probably tell. I'm just fortunate that Harbor Freight sells tools to anybody that walks in there. So there it is. Let me know what you think about that KAC grip chop down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.